Hi, welcome to day number 16 of the 30-day practice blueprint. Now, yesterday we talked about using virtual assistants, and one thing I forgot, you may be like, hey, doc, I don't have no money to hire anyone, to pay anything. I used to think that way, okay? And I still kind of do think that way. I remember one of my favorite books when I was I think it was undergrad, was the Tightwad Gazette. And so I was super economical, okay? Big time, okay? I didn't spend anything. And if you are still that way, or if you really don't have anything, a cool little tip is use an intern. Okay. So that might be a resident that works at your hospital that you work with. It could be if you have something called the SBA, Small Business Administration. They give a lot of help for small businesses. And they are, a lot of times there's college students, like undergrads that are doing marketing, that might be doing public speaking or public relations or MBA. And you might say, hey, are there any interns that would be interested in working in a healthcare practice? I'm trying to do email marketing. I'm trying to write a book. Anything you're wanting to do, just you can go to the colleges, and a lot of times you'll get help. Now you tend to have to take a little bit more of your time to do that, but you could get someone to do stuff for you. So that's a great tip. I have used a couple. There's Clark University here. I've used a couple of people in the past. Never found anyone that was really, really great, but that was a great tip if you want to save more time and save money, actually. So today we're going to talk about the 80-20 rule. Okay, so take a deep breath. You probably heard about it. It's called the Pareto Principal. I'm not an expert at teaching people the Pareto Principle, but I use it, and I'm going to use it for the rest of this course. Why? Because I only have another 15 days to share everything that I want to share with you guys. Okay, when you have a limited amount of time, okay, you tend to focus on the vital few. Okay, there's a law saying that the amount of time that you give something, it's going to fill that time. So if you have 8 hours to do something, it's going to take all 8 hours. If you give yourself a half hour, you're going to take a half hour. That's where what I recommend in terms of writing these books that you're going to write, or these videos that you're doing, you do it between patients. Okay, so you can still have a life. So you don't have to spend all your time just doing this stuff. You should give yourself a short block of time and just kind of do it. Use this time that you would normally waste. Okay, this time you would normally be checking email or doing other types of things. Use that time to actually produce content. That would be my recommendation. Once you get into this idea of marketing, you're no longer a content consumer. You're now a content creator. Okay, and that's a different thing. So I don't consume content, I create content. The only content I consume is to see what my 100 club, or those that I'm kind of, those influencers that I'm following, what they're doing, so I can kind of shadow that and model it. So let's talk a little bit about this this principle of the Pareto principle. Okay, so let me go right here and share my screen for you. Okay. So here it is. So the idea of the Pareto principle, and I'll put this article underneath it, it says that 80% of the effort produces 20% of the results, and 80% of the results come from 20% of the effort. And this is the part that I want to focus on, is that there are things, and not everything is equal. Okay, even on the stuff that I'm talking to you about up to this point, okay, not everything is equal. There are certain things that are kind of like when you look at levers or levers, one little lever can move a lot of things. Okay, so that's what I want to focus on with you. There are like these levers that you can move, big things. So in the last 14 days, I've talked about a lot of things. I've talked about like the shock and awe packages. I talked about building an email list. I've talked about all these things, but like, you get overwhelmed with this stuff. Like, how are you going to do that? You have a practice. You're seeing patients. You have to do everything else. You're worried about paying staff and things like that. So if you're going to focus on one thing, okay, the one thing I would say would be building your list. Okay, that's the first thing I would do, because if you don't have a list, you don't have anything. You don't have anything to send. If you make content, but no one's looking at it, who cares if you have content? Okay, so the first thing would be every patient that comes in, you get their email and you start building your list. If you don't want to go back and get the previous, just start today. So if you see 10 patients today, you got 10 on your list. And then what you do is you start producing content and you send it out to your list. Now, in the beginning, your content is going to suck. It's going to be bad. But over time, it's going to get better as you start getting better, learning how to use technology and having other people do stuff for you. Okay, so that would be the first thing. If we're talking 80-20, the best thing is to build your list. Okay, makes sense? Now, what we're going to do for the next 2 weeks is I'm going to do an 80-20 dive into different topics. Okay, but if you're thinking about this 80-20, how do you actually apply it in your life? Okay, what you do is you try to think of, well, what I'm doing, what's bringing in, what are the 20% of things that I'm doing that bring in, for example, 80% of my revenue? Okay, what are the 20% of things that I'm doing that bring in 80% of my revenue? So for me, what brings in 80% of my revenue are shockwave. Okay, that's one of them. Regular office visits. Okay, and then probably like different types of procedures or in-office dispensing or things like that. So you have to look at kind of what's bringing in all of your revenue. And what you do is you want to focus on that. It's not that $5 pad. You're going to spend more time talking about orthotics. Does that make sense? And then you kind of look at, well, what are the 80% of my struggles are caused by what are these 20% of the things? And this is something that I realize, this is real humbling for me, but I'm happy to share it here because that's what I do. I was realizing like all of my stresses were coming from a certain procedure, certain surgical procedures that I was doing. And what I did is I made a list of like the 15 or 20 surgeries that I'm really good at, that I do really, really well. And I wrote those down. And if anyone needed something that wasn't on that list, I referred it to one of my colleagues that was a lot better at it, that did a lot more of those cases, because that's what caused all of my struggles, all my stresses. So what are those 80% of the stresses caused by? What are the 20% of the things that are caused by those stresses? Another thing would be within your practice, like what 80% of the patients are really kind of giving you, which ones don't you like working with? You know, and usually those are the 20% of the diagnosis. And what diagnosis bring 80% of your joy? There's 20% of the diagnosis that you really like, okay, that you can really help. So those are the ways you kind of think about this 80-20 or 80-20 list, okay? And you have to be very kind of focused on it, okay? I'm going to put a couple of links. There's a book on 80-20 I would recommend. There's an 80-20 marketing book as well. And what I would recommend is just kind of in your journal today, kind of write down kind of these 80-20. Like, for example, 80% of your joy comes from doing what 20% of things. And then try to do more of that. And then what I'm going to talk about tomorrow is I'm going to talk about these time management hacks. What are the 80-20 time management hacks of getting more time? Because the main complaint I get from a lot of people is when I talk about all these things, they say, you know, doc, I don't have any time for all of this. I don't have time. Right. And so I want to kind of give you different tips of getting your time back, because we all have the same amount of time. Right. I'm seeing patients every single day, just like you are. But I want to give you an example. So we're having a snow day today in Massachusetts. And so I don't start seeing patients until noon. So what do you do at the time? Do you just kind of hang out and rest? Or do you kind of systematize and use that time productively? And that if you don't have things in your tickler to do, you're not going to do anything. So if you don't have like a plan, I want to do this blog, I want to do this video, I want to do this. When you have these extra minutes, you're just going to kind of waste it. So what I want to do is I want to be hyper focused from 8 until 5 so that I can forget about it on the nights and on the weekends. That's the way I think about it. I like separating these. And Dan Sullivan, he has a good idea called free focus and buffer days. And this is kind of how I live my life. I'll put a little link underneath that. It kind of explains about how to divide your time up. And because you don't want because like in the beginning, when I first started, I thought my wife wanted to listen to self-help books and personal development books and business books on the weekend, and she didn't. And so I separate it now. I don't do any of that stuff at nights or on the weekends, and I just focus on the time. Now, if you're very efficient during your time, you don't have to spend time other times. Okay, so that's the quick rundown. I'll put some of these resources underneath here on 80-20 and this idea of free focus and buffer days. I think getting control of your time is really, really key, because you don't want to be, our life isn't this profession. You want to have a life with a family and other things that are important to you. Okay. Once again, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Put your comments underneath it, kind of what you've taken away from this, what your thoughts are. And then also, if you want to send this to a friend, if you haven't done that, I have a special bonus. Basically, the bonus is going to be I'm not going to tell you, it's a secret, but it's something involved with different types of books and resources. Okay, that'll help you out. Okay, guys, once again, see you guys tomorrow.